Hi everyone, welcome back to Frisky, an episode where we discuss all things sexuality and marketing with Daniela and Hanasia.
Hi everyone, welcome back. The treat of this episode is another guest, our great friend and collaborator Katherine Sredl, who's joining us from Chicago. So thank you so much, Katherine, for putting up with this early morning wake up with a podcast. And Katherine is a senior lecturer at Quinlan School of Business, Loyola University, and assistant professor at University of Rijeka. So welcome you.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be with you all today. Thank you.
We're excited to have you, actually. Katherine is absolutely a star in the field of gender and marketing scholarship. Last time we met was at GAMMAC, which is this great conference dedicated to the topic for those of you listening who might be interested. And Katherine, of course, was invited straight away in our book. I think one of the first invitations we sent out. And you actually collaborated with 2 chapters, so double treat here. Do you want to say something about what you wrote?
Yes, thank you. I'm just delighted to get to know you all and your work. Thank you. And thank you for welcoming me. The chapters I wrote, the first chapter I wrote was with my co-authors, was about the TV show And Just Like That, and comparing it with and understanding what sexuality is for women and what midlife is after 20 years after Sex and the City, the first show. And my co-authors and I wrote an article on gender in Sex and the City and Entourage. So I had wanted to write something about the 20 years later TV show, and thank you for the opportunity. So that opened to me the opportunity to understand what midlife is and how it's gendered, and that's a big topic. And then it gave me my first dip into the literature on the sociology of sex, and that was a great entry point. And that's where I learned about sexual scripts theory and sexual subjectivity.
So can
sexual
you tell
scripts
us a bit?
Yeah. So sexual scripts theory is the theory that we learn how to have sex, but from what we see in pop culture, and it creates kind of a script of who does what, when, and how, and it also kind of creates norms for who's entitled, norms for pleasure and norms for heteronormative roles for men and women. It's expanding in the literature to understand a more broad view of gender and sexuality that we have in 2025. But generally speaking, it's these norms, and it tends to favor the pleasure of men, CIS men, and it kind of normalizes that women are there for relationships and men are there for their own pleasure. And so the man's job is to derive pleasure. The woman's job is to make it a relationship thing. And I don't know how that's going to work if the man is just focused on pleasure and his pleasure and she's relating, but we can talk about that too. But that's the problem with it. And I think that creates something called the pleasure gap, or the
right to orgasm. Isn't there an hashtag, I think, or right to pleasure? Yeah.
So then on the topic of right to pleasure, we have the concept of sexual subjectivity, which is our concept that we are entitled to pleasure and agency in sex. Yeah, and right. So sexual subjectivity is something that is not the same for every group of people. It's different for different groups of people. And I would say that sexual scripts tend to create and reinforce these norms. In Sex in the City, the first one, we saw a lot of challenges to the sexual script, and we saw a lot of new sexual subjectivities emerging, also in the TV show Entourage. And then let's look at it at midlife. So bringing that into midlife.
What did you find out?
Well, it's very hard. We found out that, so we used gerontology studies, which is the study of aging. We found out that it's really hard to find a place in the sexual script for women in midlife, because it seems like once you get that midlife, so midlife would be from 50 on, then there's aging, but midlife it's not old age, which is much later, but in midlife, no, there's no space really in the sexual script for women in midlife, because, and then I'll tell you the other finding, then I'll get into details. The other finding is that sexual subjectivity and the entitlement to pleasure and agency, it will increase in midlife compared to other times. Yeah, because you have gone through quite a bit of challenges by then, and you understand your own entitlement to pleasure. Also, it's not in the show as much, but it's much more in the first Sex in the City. But in society right now in the U.S., the cycle is that women, after typical childbearing years, right now the focus is more on solo sex, where your own pleasure is the focus. So that kind of changes your subjectivity for a lot of reasons. We can get into details on that why. Anyway, so there's not a lot of space for the sexual script for middle-aged women, because they're no longer like picked by men. They're not good, quote unquote, choices for reproduction. This very evolutionary view of sex, and the body is the mechanics of reproduction or not reproduction. So your self-concept, but your self-concept changes so that have more of a concept that you're allowed to experience pleasure and agency. Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, and you show it, you experience it, of course, with sexual behavior. So I'll just pause for a second and say what I'm talking about when I say sex and sexual behavior. So sex is a person's capacity for sexual feelings. So it's not like or sorry for being crude, it's not like I'm making hand gestures right now. It's not. It's a person's capacity for sexual feelings. So
so it's not just the act. That's what
it's not that the act, right? Thank you. It's not just the act. It's not the mechanics. It's not the when we talk about, so if we're going to approach sex as a person's capacity for sexual feelings, then sexual pleasure is the events and persons, okay, and the persons. So events includes things like initiation, like the overture, occurrence, the orgasm, the things that you do, the touches, direction, feedback loops.
Can I interrupt you for a second,
yeah,
Katherine?
Yeah.
I find fascinating that it's so hard to have a taxonomy of sex. Literally how to name names and how to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate how you're kind of putting these distinctions, because, for example, pleasures as both, in a way, the act and the people involved, like that is also part of the. So I'm really enjoying this bit, to be honest, because it's so hard.
It's really hard, and it's been hard our literature before this chapter says that this is hard to write about. It's stigmatized to talk about, and it's stigma because even as I'm saying it and I wrote about it, I'm talking about it, I'm like, are people going to ask me what I like? Like what, you know what I mean? I don't want,
Yeah.
and again, the concept is that I'm supposed to be the object of somebody else. As a woman, I'm supposed to be this object, or as a straight woman, I'm supposed to be the object of somebody's action, because that's the script. It's changing. Yeah, I do like talking about it and naming things, and it's not clinical, and it's neither clinical nor is it like you're talking to a toddler about their body parts. Yeah. So sexual pleasure is the events and persons. So events is touch, pleasure, feedback loops, all that. And then person-related pleasure is the communication that you have with your partner, the trust that you have with your partner, and the negotiation you have with your partner. In some parts in the U.S. and the rural South, or in the South, the word for sex was called relations, because referring to the interaction between the two people, and communication, trust, and negotiation. So relations. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Having relations with somebody. Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining the theory behind how sexual scripts are developed and reproduced. I think that the context that you chose, Sex and the City, and now the sequel to that, and Just Like That, is a very good example and also a very influential voice in that space. A big, an entire generation of women have been socialized into what sex means, what sexuality means as women through Sex and the City. So what does And Just Like That tell us now about midlife and sexuality in relation to women mostly?
So what it tells us is that some of the things we have to deal with, the basic issues don't change. It's how we frame them now changes, because we are. So, for example, generally speaking, we know that women dress for themselves and to please themselves. Some people might, and again, dressing in a more sexual way can just be to please yourself. All right. When you address the issue as a 55-year-old woman who likes fashion, then it stays the same. But people would say that it's abhorrent and inappropriate for you to dress the same way because you are old now, and it offends people that you have sex. Like, it's gross. Your private parts don't work anymore. They're all dried up. It's offensive to dress that way. It's not appropriate. It's not the role. It's not your role. So still, right? And then the other one would be, I would say, if we see this as a time of life where you are self-aware that you're in a new stage, it's often overlooked, right? Because you're not young anymore, and you're not quote unquote old. So the issue in that becomes, is it audacious for you? Do you have the right to continue to ask for love and pleasure and self-actualization and connection in romance? Yeah. And that can either be as a woman who is in a marriage or in a relationship, or a woman who is single. Do you still have are you still entitled to be human now that you can't have children?
It's, I find, we really, honestly, we were so charmed by the choice of discussing And Just Like That, because at the time, really was just out, and it was definitely a massive pop culture moment. I love what you said, Athanasia, like really generations of women got socialized into again, it was a taxonomy of sex, like the waxing and the different, what would be pleasurable, what you wouldn't, at which stages of the relationship you were supposed to do. So having that kind of collective conversation, and definitely the fact that this, these women, these actresses had aged in the meanwhile. And I remember all the conversation around also the different kind of choices, like these actresses outside of Sex and the City had decided to take with their bodies, and the moment they show up and they do the sort of, and just like that, there was a whole stare around, how they kept themselves somehow. And I feel like this comes in really nicely with what you're saying, because there is immediately some form of judgment just by the implications of what, plastic surgery, but also keeping a certain body type or dyeing your hair and all of that, just even before having watched any of the episodes. So as women, they were already somehow grilled, let's say, for or complimented as well, because there was also that aspect. But there was a lot of chat, of course.
Yeah, there was a lot of chat. It was much anticipated, and there was a lot of hate thrown at it because how dare you take up space? And then I'm not sure. I think a lot of people hate watched it, like even fans of it, even people who love the series and show watched it, and they were like, "This is really bad, but I love it." I once told a friend that watching it was like going to your cousin's third wedding. Like, that it might not be that great, but it's going to be fun and you're going to enjoy it, and you like your cousin, so you're going to go and have fun, but you're not going. Yeah.
I'm going to steal this. That's so good.
That was definitely me. I could not with some of the storylines, to be honest, but I realized that it has had an impact showing these different representations of women during that life stage. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more in terms of what you were able to unpack through your chapter when it comes to that life stage for women and their sexualities.
Yeah, so what is their body for at that age? It's for pleasure, right? If that's what they want. I mean, it's for pleasure, yeah. And there is a lot of the assault on they have to deal with the same idea that they're having sex for somebody else's pleasure, right? Or that they're there for relational goals. So the main idea that comes through is that their subjectivity switches a lot, and they are there for pleasure and for self-actualizing, right? And that was seen as in the Sex and the City also, but we saw it's challenged in a new way now, because I guess in Sex and the City, it's like, are you going to get married or not? And just like that, it's like, do you still have the right to experience pleasure and anything else you're looking for, right? We didn't see that much in this show. Usually the problem would be worrying about sexual functioning, arousal, and desire, but like the mechanical, physical parts of it. But we didn't see that. What I saw a lot, I think women in that life stage have to face the issue of aging well, and there is. So what does that mean, right? Just you have to keep your body up. Is it appropriate? You have to deal with a lot with whether you're allowed to be seen in society now that you're aged, and you can't be objectified anymore, or you can still, but it's not. You're like the second choice. Like, do you still have a right to exist? So I think they're dealing with the fact that they have throttled up on power, and they have a lot of wisdom and knowledge to give. But are they allowed to be seen and to contribute? You saw that a lot with Charlotte going back to work, and then you saw that with Seema, who is constantly working, throughout her career, and she refuses this trope that she should be courageous for still being in love, right? Why are you not supposed to want to have the beauty of human connection from when you're 53? Is it because you can't reproduce? No. I mean, so we see them challenging that. Yeah.
I think that these pop culture representations are also very important, and studying them really, just sort of from a consumer research perspective as well. So important because they give us a perspective on the conversation, which is not the medicalized one. Because of course, like we tend to speak about sexuality and well-being very much from the perspective of all the healthcare world. And I'm thinking not long ago, I was looking into a project for hormonal replacement therapy, and Novo Nordisk had launched this HRT in the UK market called Gina, and it was very much advertised around basically allowing women to have sex again, dealing with things such as vaginal dryness and all of that. And it was so again, medicalized very much. Even the images that were chosen, a handshake probably would have been sexier than that. And so I think it's in the media that we're looking for a warmer depiction of sex and sexuality than at that life stage. What do you think, Katherine?
Yes, there's a lot. I agree with you. Yes, there is Sex in the City, and then just like that, give us a space that's take us away from this over medicalized. I think what we're all asking is what's normal, and when we talk about the function, this arousal, desire, and so on, or reproduction, we kind of want to know, is it normal to do this sequence of actions of arousal? But we also want to know, is it normal to feel this way? And I don't think these depictions of sex as function, as physical, really help us answer the question that we're maybe most of us are answering or asking. Now, I have just left out everybody who has a functioning problem, right? But it's too medicalized, yeah. Or the way that it's medicalized doesn't really help us that much. I think if we prioritize pleasure as part of sex, then it can bring a lot of that relational part about healthism and wellness. Yeah, so healthism and wellness is often seen as a moral obligation as we age, that we have to remain sexually active, and that is not helpful for people who have problems in this mechanical. It's not part of sex, the functioning part. And then in the self-actualization and pleasure part of it, if you're just talking about it as moral, I'm not sure that moral conversations leave a space open for subjective experiences of pleasure, right? And it's so as we move and get older, we're supposed to continue to be having sex like it's a moral obligation, like walking 10,000 steps a day or drinking a lot of water, right? Or eating enough fiber, whatever it is. So yeah, we begin to have anxiety. Am I normal doing this? There's a lot of pharmaceutical around saying what is normal as you age, and healthism and wellness. Of course, it's all organized, generally speaking, around a straight man's erection. And somehow that's easier to talk about in mass media than vaginal dryness. I guess it's culturally bound. In some countries, you would see that.
I'm not entirely sure about it. I think, again, as you just said, is very much confined within the perimeter of the menopause.
I am glad that you are centering pleasure in our conversation, because I feel that it is something that is not included in much discourse around sexuality, and especially when we're talking about women's sexuality, I find that most academic conversations and also in mass media, most conversations around sexuality and sex are actually not sexy. And centering pleasure, I think, can give us a very different perspective, less medicalized, more messy, more fleshy, perhaps, around what it means to derive pleasure, to use our bodies for pleasure and not for reproduction and not for something else, but something that is quite personal and essentially us being the ones that receive the benefit and not either someone else or society.
Yeah, I agree. It's usually seen as a woman, it's usually seen for women's sexual health is usually seen as going to the gynecologist to get a pap smear, breast exams, breast self-exams, mammography, and then your effort to get pregnant, carry a baby, deliver a baby. I don't think there's a lot of concern about what happens to your body after that. It's can be pretty traumatic, but a little bit. And then for both men and women, it would be around prevention, public health, which is be the prevention of the spread of STIs, right? And when we talk about those both leave out pleasure, right? Yeah. And the thing about sex is that most people tend to do it to experience pleasure. So we're not really thinking that much about public health when we have sex.
Imagine if we did.
And the interventions on public health are very isolated from the sequences of having sex or the relational element, where maybe if you want to talk about condom use, which is down globally, but if you wanted to talk about condom use, you could bring it into the concept of pleasure instead of public health, because people are tending to think more about pleasure than public health when they're having sex. And in reproduction, probably asking a woman or letting a woman speak about pleasure when dealing with reproduction her pleasure would probably have a big impact on those things too. Yeah.
Having had your experience with Sex and the City, Entourage, now and Just Like That, and perhaps from your own observations, how do you feel about representations of women's sexuality? Are you optimistic? Are we moving towards a direction where we're going to see more empowering representations, or are we taking a step back at the moment?
I think generally in pop culture, we're probably going to see the same tropes reproduced all the time because it's very risky to challenge them and change them. We will continue to see, as always, we will continue to see glimpses of hope that include pleasure and include the visibility of women in middle age, right? And incrementally there will be change, right? On the concept of pleasure, I would love it if public health could include the concept of pleasure, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen as far as the issue. Again, if they're to reproduction, I think that women are going to start demanding that conversation, right? Times have changed a little bit, and I think millennials and Gen Z are reluctant to accept, women are reluctant to accept their exclusion from conversations, like they want to be included, right? But we will see representations of pleasure. It's just gonna be niche and far off.
Katherine, I campaign that your research leads to the inclusion of pleasure on public policy, on healthcare. I mean, I think it would be amazing. I like how it is a disruptive concept almost, right? If we talk about sexuality, and I loved what you said, like we don't think about the whole health world when we're having sex. But also I think that pleasure brings back to our bodies and connections also with ourselves. I love what you said about solo sex at the very beginning of this podcast, because we kind of forget how sexuality is also a relationship we have with ourselves. So that I feel is very important among the things you said.
I'm really excited about this. Thank you for encouraging me. I don't know what I'm going to do next, and I'm going to reflect on our time together, and I think that'll develop through reflecting on it. I do, my main method would be qualitative interviews and participant observation. So, I'm maybe the topic is, maybe the next theoretical area is pleasure. Yeah, and that's great. And then I'll have to interview mid-aged women about their pleasure. That could be cool. I don't want to give away don't steal my research, okay? Anybody out there, don't.
Anybody listening, please do not steal this idea. I think that this will be an amazing project. We've had the opportunity a few years ago with my friend and co-author Carol Zanette to interview women about their experiences with pornography consumption from the side of the audience. And something that came up very strongly in our findings was this idea of pleasure. And when we were looking at the literature, we found that women's voices were not centered around pleasure. It was mostly due to concerns and harms in relation to pornography consumption. But we were quite lucky that we were able to work with this concept of pleasure and explain how women actually watch porn because they find it enjoyable and pleasurable, and it's a way for them to explore their sexuality, to learn about themselves, to experiment with the partners. So we found it quite productive to work with the concept of pleasure.
Okay, thanks. I will read that immediately and I will cite it. And thanks. Good. That'll help me. And I think Luciana Walther has done interviews with people about pleasure. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's helpful. And let's talk about porn for a second. And the concept of pleasure and sex being for sexual feelings. It's interesting the way that lesbian softcore porn frames pleasure compared to just basic the normal template of porn, and it really opens us up to understanding pleasure from a woman's point of view. Yeah.
With the concept of pleasure, I think we can say thank you to Katherine. Maybe the idea for your new research project will come from the comments of this episode. Who knows? Maybe someone listening is going to throw some great ideas here.
And don't steal it.
Don't, please don't.
How do you cite a podcast somewhere online? Okay.
We'll make sure it's cited. Katherine, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we'd love to hear more about how your research progresses from now onwards.
Okay. To end on the note of pleasure, it's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Katherine. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Another episode of Frisky. We will see you next week with another special guest.
See you.